The music was playing. Guests were dressed in their finest clothes. Flowers covered the walls of the beautiful wedding hall, while hundreds of people waited for the bride to walk down the aisle. But behind the closed doors of the bridal room, something terrible was happening. A young woman stood in front of a mirror, tears streaming down her face. Her name was Amara, and today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. She was supposed to marry the man she loved, a humble young man named Daniel. Daniel wasn't rich. He didn't drive expensive cars. He didn't live in a mansion. He wore simple clothes, worked quietly, and never talked about money. Amara's family had never approved of him. Her mother constantly reminded her that love alone could not pay bills. Her father had even warned her, "Amara, you are throwing away your future for a man who has nothing." But Amara didn't care. She loved Daniel. At least she thought she knew the man she was about to marry. What she didn't know was that Daniel had been hiding a secret so enormous that when it was finally revealed, everyone in that wedding hall would wish they had treated him differently, and the person who would regret her decision the most would be Amara's own sister. 6 months earlier, Amara was walking home from work when she saw Daniel standing beside a small roadside food stall. He smiled when he saw her. "You're late today," Amara laughed. "My boss kept me at the office." Daniel handed her a small paper bag. "I bought you some food." She looked inside. It was her favorite meal. "You remembered?" "I remember everything about you." Amara smiled. That was Daniel. He wasn't a man who impressed people with expensive gifts. He impressed her with little things. When she was sick, he stayed beside her. When she was stressed, he listened. When she had no money to pay her rent one month, Daniel quietly helped her without telling anyone. But there was something strange about Daniel. He never complained about money. Whenever someone asked him what he did for a living, he simply said, "I manage a few businesses." Nobody knew what that meant, and nobody thought much about it. Because Daniel dressed like an ordinary young man, his shoes were simple, his watch was inexpensive, he drove an old car, and he lived in a modest apartment. To Amara's family, that meant only one thing. He was poor, but Daniel wasn't poor, not even close. He owned one of the largest private business groups in the region. His companies operated in real estate, technology, logistics, agriculture, and hospitality. He had investments across several African countries. His private company employed thousands of people, but Daniel had made one decision. He would never reveal his wealth to the woman he loved until he was certain she loved him for who he was. Unfortunately, he wasn't only testing Amara, he was unknowingly testing everyone around her. Amara had a younger sister named Vanessa. Vanessa was beautiful, she was confident, she always dressed perfectly, and she believed money was the most important thing in life. Whenever Amara talked about Daniel, Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You're really going to marry that man?" Amara frowned. "Daniel is a good man." "A good man?" Vanessa laughed. "Good men don't live in tiny apartments and drive old cars." Amara became quiet. Vanessa continued, "You are beautiful. You could marry someone wealthy." "I don't need someone wealthy." "You say that now." Vanessa walked toward the mirror and admired herself. "Wait until you see how difficult life becomes." Amara ignored her, but Vanessa became increasingly interested in Daniel, not because she loved him, because she wanted to know whether he truly had money. One evening, Vanessa followed Daniel after he left Amara's house. She watched him drive for almost an hour. Eventually, Daniel stopped outside a large commercial building. Vanessa stared. The building was enormous. She saw several luxury vehicles parked outside. Daniel entered through a private entrance. Vanessa became curious. "What does he do here?" She took out her phone and searched the name written on the building. Her eyes widened. The company was one of the most successful privately owned companies in the country, but Vanessa didn't realize something. Daniel was not simply an employee, he was the owner. The following morning, Vanessa returned to the building. She stood across the street and watched employees entering. Then she saw Daniel, but this time something was different. A luxury vehicle stopped beside him. A driver stepped out and opened the door. Daniel entered. Vanessa couldn't believe her eyes. She followed the vehicle from a distance. It eventually arrived at a magnificent corporate headquarters. Daniel stepped out. Immediately, several senior executives approached him. "Good morning, Chairman." Vanessa froze. "Chairman?" She watched as Daniel walked into the building. Everyone respected him. Executives who appeared far older than him stood when he entered the room. Vanessa's heart began beating faster. The man her sister believed was poor was rich, very rich. And suddenly, Vanessa saw Daniel differently. She began imagining luxury houses, designer clothes, expensive vacations, luxury cars, a completely different life. And then she made a terrible decision. She decided she would take Daniel away from her sister. Vanessa began spending more time around Daniel. She started complimenting him. She suddenly became interested in his work. She asked questions about his dreams. Daniel noticed, but he said nothing. One afternoon, Vanessa approached him. "Daniel, do you really love my sister?" Daniel looked at her. "Of course." "Even though she doesn't understand how successful you are?" Daniel smiled. "Amara doesn't need to understand my money." Vanessa's smile disappeared. "You deserve someone who can stand beside you." "I already have that person." "Are you sure?" Daniel looked directly into her eyes. "Very sure." Vanessa walked away. She had failed to seduce him, but she wasn't ready to give up. Then she discovered something. Amara and Daniel were planning their wedding, and Vanessa realized that the wedding could give her the perfect opportunity. The night before the wedding, Vanessa entered Amara's bedroom. "Are you nervous?" Amara smiled. "A little." Vanessa sat beside her. "You really love him?" "With all my heart." Vanessa looked at her sister. For a moment, guilt appeared in her eyes, but greed quickly pushed it away. "What if Daniel isn't who you think he is?" Amara frowned. "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Vanessa stood. "Just be careful." After leaving the room, Vanessa made a phone call. The plan was already in motion. On the morning of the wedding, something unexpected happened. Amara received a message telling her to come to a private room. When she arrived, she found several people waiting. They told her that Daniel had supposedly been involved in a serious financial problem. They showed her documents. They told her that the wedding needed to be delayed. Amara was terrified. What is happening? Nobody gave her a clear answer. Meanwhile, Vanessa was preparing herself. She put on the wedding dress, she covered her face with a veil, and she walked toward the ceremony. The guests stood. The music began. Nobody realized the bride had changed, not even Daniel. Or at least, that's what everyone thought. Vanessa walked down the aisle. Daniel watched her approach. His expression remained calm. She reached him. The pastor began the ceremony. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" Daniel looked at the bride. Then he smiled. "I do." Vanessa almost collapsed from excitement. She thought she had won. She believed she had successfully taken her sister's fiancé. But Daniel knew something she didn't. He knew that the woman standing beside him was Vanessa. He had discovered the plan hours earlier, and instead of exposing her immediately, he decided to let the truth reveal itself. The ceremony continued. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. "You may now kiss the bride." Vanessa leaned toward him. Daniel whispered something in her ear. "You really believe I don't know who you are?" Vanessa froze. Her heart stopped. Daniel stepped back. Then he removed the bride's veil. The room became silent. Gasps echoed throughout the hall. Someone screamed, "That's not Amara!" Vanessa's face turned pale, and then the doors opened. Amara walked into the hall. Amara looked around in confusion. She saw Vanessa standing beside Daniel, her eyes filled with tears. "Vanessa?" Her sister couldn't speak. Daniel turned toward everyone. I think it's time we stop pretending." The room became silent. Daniel looked at Amara. "I'm sorry you had to discover this on your wedding day." Amara stared at him. "Discover what?" Daniel took out his phone. He made one call. Within minutes, several executives entered the wedding hall. They were followed by security personnel. One of the executives approached Daniel. "Chairman, the board is waiting for you." The guests stared. Amara's father looked confused. "Chairman?" Daniel nodded. Then he looked toward the giant screen behind the stage. A presentation appeared. It showed Daniel's companies, major properties, hotels, factories, technology companies, agricultural estates, investment portfolios, and finally, his estimated business empire. The hall erupted in whispers. Amara covered her mouth. Her mother sat down. Vanessa stood frozen. The man they had all called poor was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. Amara looked at Daniel. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel walked toward her. "Because I wanted to know whether you loved me or my money." Amara began crying. "I would have loved you either way." "I know." Daniel smiled sadly. "That is why I chose you." Vanessa suddenly stepped forward. "Daniel, please." Everyone turned toward her. "I made a mistake." Daniel looked at her. "You didn't make one mistake, Vanessa." She lowered her head. "You made a choice." "I was jealous." "You wanted what your sister had," Vanessa cried. "I thought you were poor," Daniel replied quietly. "And that is exactly why you wanted me?" Vanessa had no answer. Vanessa fell to her knees. "Please forgive me." Amara looked at her sister. She was heartbroken. For years, she had defended Vanessa. She had trusted her. She never imagined that her own sister would betray her on the most important day of her life. "You didn't just take my wedding dress," Amara said. "You tried to take my future," Vanessa cried. "I know." Daniel remained silent. Then Amara said something nobody expected. "I forgive you." Vanessa looked up. "But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences." Amara walked away. Daniel and Amara eventually left the wedding hall, but their story didn't end there. Months later, Daniel brought Amara to his headquarters. He showed her his office. It overlooked the city. Amara smiled. "You have all this?" Daniel laughed. "Yes." She looked around. "Why were you living like you had nothing?" Daniel answered. "Because I wanted to know what life would look like if I lost everything except the person I loved." Amara held his hand. "And now?" Daniel smiled. "Now I know." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring. Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, this time there will be no lies, no disguises, and no secrets." He went down on one knee. "Amara, will you marry me?" She smiled through her tears. "Yes." Months later, Amara and Daniel finally had their wedding, but this time there was no deception, no sister in disguise, no secrets, just two people who had discovered that genuine love was more valuable than wealth. Vanessa eventually began rebuilding her life. She learned that chasing another person's fortune could cost her something far more valuable: trust. And Daniel never forgot the lesson. Money can attract people. Power can impress people. Luxury can surround you with people. But none of those things can tell you who genuinely loves you. Sometimes the person everyone calls poor may simply be the person who has nothing to prove. And sometimes the greatest test of someone's character is not what they do when you are rich, but how they treat you when they believe you have nothing. Because true love doesn't ask, "How much do you have?" True love asks, "Who are you when nobody is watching?" If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to African Tales Arising for more powerful African stories filled with love, betrayal, mystery, family drama, and unforgettable life lessons. And tell us in the comments. If you discovered that the poor man you rejected was actually a billionaire, would you regret your decision? Until our next story, remember, Never judge someone's worth by what they have today. Sometimes the person you underestimate today may be the person you wish you had never lost tomorrow.